The year is 1964. It's a beautiful spring day in Cumbria, England. Fireman Jim Templeton has the day off and takes his family to a local park near an inlet called the Solway Firth. 5-year-old Elizabeth gathers a bouquet of wildflowers while her father, an amateur photographer, snaps a few photos of the adorable tot on his new Kodak camera. But one shows something no one can explain. Someone dressed in what appears to be a spacesuit can be seen just behind the young girl's head. Take a closer look at that white outfit and what looks like a helmet with a face shield. Sure, it looks like this guy could be planting a flag on the moon. But Jim swears there was no one else behind his daughter when he took the photo, and certainly no astronauts from this planet or any other. The image spreads quickly to newspapers around the world, as does speculation on what this mysterious figure could be. Importantly, the photo is from the early years of the space age, with both the Soviets and the American programs making regular headlines. So the spaceman theory quickly gained traction. On the flip side, the escalating nuclear arms race fuels wild speculation that the figure was wearing a radiation hazmat suit. Coincidentally, there was a Royal Air Force base used to develop nuclear missiles near the Solway Firth. Some speculated this figure could have actually been a Soviet spy. Intrigue involving nuclear weapons sounds like a stretch, but remember, Cold War hysteria was still riding high just after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So what's really in this photograph? A visitor from space, a Soviet nuclear spy, or is it just a decades-old hoax? Let's see what develops when we consult our experts. First, we determine if the appearance of the figure was the result of some camera development trickery.
To do some trick photography in the 60s, some would do a double exposure where you're taking two images onto the same slide of negative. Now, that's not possible to create a scene like this, however, because you would see some kind of ghosting artifacts of this young girl. Especially since her wind is blowing in her hair, it'd be impossible to duplicate that same moment twice for both exposures.
So it seems as though there really was someone or something in the background.
If this was a person with a helmet on, then this arm is actually kind of pointing the wrong way. It's not an arm that's kind of coming out and forwards. It really looks like this is viewed from behind. Now, if I was to obscure the head of the person, it looks way more natural as something being viewed from behind.
And perhaps what everyone thinks is a helmet is, in fact, something else.
That would mean that this dark area here isn't actually a faceplate. It's just the hair of the person. So this is a hat, this is the hair. So I think what we're seeing here is a figure, and they're facing away from the camera.
Based on the figure's anatomy, clothing, and setting, West's best guess is that this is a woman in a hat.
We do have another photograph of the scene. What we see here is the mother. Now, the mother is wearing a bluish-looking dress. If we see the top here in this region, it's almost white in this photograph.
The theory is that the blue dress and her hat looks white here due to overexposure. But if it was the girl's mother, why didn't the family notice at the time?
And when the pictures get developed, they look at them days or weeks later, they just simply don't remember that that person happened to be standing in that position. No one has a perfect recording of exactly where everybody was stood on a particular moment, like 3 days ago or a week ago.
Based on Mick West's analysis of the clothing, we're going to agree and say it's a woman in a hat. It's summer 1991 in Barnby Place, Bradford, UK. 15-year-old Adam Mawson has been using a camcorder to record his house when no one's home, in an effort to document some strange recent happenings. And on one of the tapes, Adam finds something frightening. Nothing seems amiss until a shadowy figure slowly begins to emerge from the chair. Look closely. It eventually rises and moves about the room, passing behind the door frame before returning and seemingly disappearing through the wall. Moments later, a second figure appears from the right and follows closely behind the other into the wall.
I was scared to death because I thought, what the hell is that? And that's when I showed my parents it, and my mum said, oh yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen it with her own eyes.
And to journalist Alexis Brooks, it sounds like a classic haunted house tale.
Barnby Place ranks among one of the most haunted places that I have ever seen. I mean, you're talking about disembodied voices, doors opening and closing on their own, and even what I would call a shadow person phenomenon.
Shadow people are described as dark silhouettes with human shapes and profiles. These shadowy creatures are sometimes interpreted as the presence of a spirit or other entity. Others believe these figures to be negative beings that can be repelled by various means, including invoking the name of Jesus.
I have seen and heard so many accounts of what we call the shadow person phenomenon. Many reports of shadow people include harassing an individual in their bedroom. So I would dare say that in addition to the more conventional haunting, we have what I would call a shadow person phenomenon going on in that home.
A figure often associated with shadow people is the Hat Man, a famous urban legend who wears a dark coat, a hat, and is unusually tall. Sometimes the figure is thought to be the devil himself. Adam's father still lives in the house on Barnby Place and says the activity has died down since he found religion. But that only seems to confirm that perhaps something spiritual was going on. Our experts take a closer look. First, we head to forensic video analyst Michael Primo for an authenticity check of this digitized copy.
We're not able to identify it as an actual ghost through forensic testing, but it could be the product of when the video was processed between the time that it was produced on tape to this digital version as some sort of artifact that is concealed as the object travels by, but is it CGI? Less likely.
So this footage probably wasn't manipulated intentionally, but how about accidentally?
These shadowy figures don't appear to be something that was introduced into the recording based on the artifacts that are present throughout its movement. And because we see these shadowy figures over several seconds in multiple instances, it's more likely something that actually happened in the video images.
So this recording itself may not have been manipulated, but we are not ready to declare this a ghost. We turn to physicist Dr. Matthew Shadagis, who suspects something shady.
What we're seeing here is this dark figure or shadow seeming to pass into the left wall and disappear, which would favor the ghost explanation. However, if you look very carefully over these few frames, there is some pixel darkening on the left that would seem to indicate that the shadow goes over the wall as we'd expect for a normal shadow being cast by someone off camera. It does not fully explain all the subtle motions we see, such as when the shape rises out of the chair, but it's the most plausible non-ghost explanation that I can come up with.
Primo disagrees and doesn't see any evidence that the shadow was created by someone off camera.
If the shadow was produced by the operator that's standing behind the camera, we would expect to see more of that cast off on the regions surrounding the doorway. But it's not produced over here on the right side of the image. These darker regions, being some sort of shadow is not really possible with the way that we don't see that information on the doorway.
So if we're ruling out shadows of someone off camera, could this truly be a ghost? Some say physics itself is all the proof you need of life after death, because the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. We bring that theory to Dr. Shadagis.
This is a misinterpretation of what conservation of energy means. The very notion of conservation of energy comes from energy changing form. And a great example of this, energy exchange, occurs after we have passed away and our body decomposes. Gases and other elements will feed the worms after we've died. Therefore, we cannot use an argument like conservation of energy from physics in order to prove or disprove life after death.
So, it seems current science still can't attest to the existence of ghosts. But as of now, we can't explain this video any other way. Our verdict? This video is a bona fide case of unexplained phenomena, over 30 years running. 2020, Staffordshire, England. Historical researcher Andrew Baker is visiting Shugborough Hall, a centuries-old country house with numerous neoclassical monuments. But he's here to see just one. Framed by a pair of columns sits an enigma carved in stone, the Shepherd's Monument.
The monument stands by the river, surrounded by trees and quite dark shrubs. So it's eerie and mysterious.
Footage of the marble relief shows 4 people gathered around a tomb that reads Et in Arcadia Ego. Below the carved scene is a stone plaque bearing only the cryptic letters OUOSVAVV, flanked by a D and an M. Andrew says its meaning is one of the most enduring puzzles in England.
The idea that there was something in England that had a coded message on it might be to do with secret societies, treasure, who knows what. It's as if it's been planted there for us to read today.
Historians believe the Shepherd's Monument was commissioned by the estate's owner, Thomas Anson, and that it was built sometime around the 1750s. Beyond that, the details get murky.
The theory goes that Thomas Anson's brother, Royal Navy Admiral George Anson, circumnavigated the globe collecting treasure that was hidden away somewhere, and that the Shugborough Hall inscription leads to the location of that lost treasure.
Yet some believe the inscription leads to treasure, even more precious than gold.
Another theory goes that the Anson family were members of an organization known as the Priory of Sion, descendants of the Knights Templar who were rumored to originally be charged with protecting the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is said to be the cup that was used to serve wine at the Last Supper and collected blood from Jesus during the crucifixion.
Or could the Holy Grail be something else? According to legend, the Priory of Sion claimed that Jesus Christ was an earthly, not a heavenly king whose bloodline traced itself to ancient France's Merovingian dynasty. So some believe the Holy Grail is not actually a physical cup, but rather the Priory's secret knowledge that Jesus married Mary Magdalene and had children with her. One codebreaker has suggested the Shugborough inscription stands for Jesus as deity defy, which has been linked to these controversial beliefs. Many of these theories laid the groundwork for Dan Brown's wildly popular Da Vinci Code franchise. Professional scholars have dismissed many of those claims as pseudo-history, but the idea of a secret society protecting a holy bloodline retains a grip on popular culture. So it's time to see if our experts can chisel out the truth. Archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart begins with the theory that George Anson collected treasures from around the world and that the code is a way to find them.
What George Anson collected in today's money would be millions of dollars of wealth. But if we look at the Shugborough Hall property and all of these amazing monuments, it would appear that most of George's wealth went into the estate itself.
If Anson spent the lion's share of his fortune, which seems to be the case since his family fell out of prominence, then maybe this isn't a literal treasure map, but rather a clue to how the Ansons hid the truth about the Holy Grail as members of the Priory of Sion. Catholic miracle researcher Michael O'Neill says the main problem with that theory is this supposed secret society didn't actually exist.
In the 1950s, a Frenchman named Pierre Plantard started this Priory of Sion, and he attempted to draw a connection between that secret society and the Knights Templar. Unfortunately, there was no such connection. And then in 1993, we see a raid of the apartment of Plantard where they find all this documentation and letters between Plantard and his friends talking about their intentions to perpetrate this great hoax. So the proof is in the pudding.
So if the Priory of Sion and its connection to the Holy Grail is completely made up, then what does this inscription mean? Barnhart thinks he's found a clue.
The inscription itself is clearly the initials, the first letters of a longer statement. This D and this M are typically on Roman tombs, and it means dis manibus, which means dedicated to the venerated dead. So this may be some sort of monument dedicated to someone who's passed away.
For us, many unanswered questions about this inscription remain. Our verdict is that it's a memorial dedication to someone, though we're still not really sure who. We may have to accept that the message was meant to be kept private and may stay that way forever. October 2017. It's a seemingly typical day in Luton, England. A nearby security camera is recording as a determined man approaches a small blue car parked on the street. He reaches under the front bumper and after a few seconds proceeds to not only lift the vehicle up, but actually push it backwards. Look again. The car is parked, but he's able to push it out of the way in his bare feet. The man performing this incredible feat of strength is Hakan Akar, aka the Incredible Tulk.
I couldn't go anywhere because someone blocked my driveway. So my thought process was I'm going to go to the car, I'm going to see how heavy it is, decided to lift it. I started just pushing and pushing and pushing until the car was actually veering off into the road.
Hakan isn't the only modern-day Hercules caught on camera treating a car like a children's toy. This video from Russia in 2016 shows a man overpowering this vehicle's acceleration. So how are these guys doing this?
Some have speculated that there might be a genetic mutation behind super strength. There's a protein called myostatin, which typically inhibits the growth of muscles. But if you have this condition that limits myostatin, your muscles will actually grow bigger.
Artificial substances can also be involved pushing the limits of human strength. Steroids are the modern method, of course, but the practice goes back ages.
We know that warriors in South America from Aztec and Mayan cultures would often ingest plants that contained what we would sort of call narcotics today for the purpose of getting ready for combat.
Mescaline, which naturally occurs in cacti such as peyote, were common sources of such drugs.
It reduces fear, but it also opens up blood vessels. It opens up how much oxygen the body can take in.
Hakan assures us that's not what's giving him his strength.
I've never took anything in my life. I've always been naturally quite strong. And then once I started actually going to the gym and training, I realized that my strength levels were quite high.
So Hakan's superior strength really is the result of nature and regular trips to the gym. But is his ability to move an entire car as impressive as it looks to the rest of us? Or is there something else at work here? Let's have our experts do the heavy lifting. Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi says Hakan's physical strength is part of the equation, but he is also getting a big assist from an age-old scientific principle.
We know cars are heavy, on average around 3,000 pounds, but he's using one of the 6 simple machines, and that is the lever. The front tires are where the fulcrum is located, and he's basically just lifting it off the ground a little bit, one end of it, and that's very different than just picking up a car and lifting it above your head.
Hakan has essentially turned the car into one big resistance arm that redistributes its own weight toward the back wheels, similar to how you can move a bunch of heavy rocks in a wheelbarrow. Professor Michio Kaku also says it's not the muscles you may think that are at work here.
We're not talking about upper body muscular strength. We're talking about his feet helping to push the car, and the car in turn is designed to minimize friction in the horizontal direction.
That explains why those bare feet seem to help as well.
My Crocs ended up getting flung off at the same time. I thought I'd get a bit more traction with my feet.
Hakan built up a greater coefficient of friction with the road, allowing for even more horizontal force. And as for the guy in Russia battling the accelerating car,
look at the wheels. He's lifted the car off the ground, so that most of the energy of the gasoline is being used to simply spin wheels.
Because this is a front-wheel drive vehicle, the back tires on the ground aren't powered by the accelerator.
He appears to be able to take a car's forward motion and stop it, when actually that energy is being wasted.
Our verdict? A blend of strength and proportional mass. There's no doubt that Hakan has above-average strength, but a variety of outside conditions are making the Incredible Tulk's astounding feat slightly easier than it looks. It's February 2022 in the village of Lyneham in Wiltshire, England. Drivers trying to turn onto Route B4069 are greeted with a sign posted by police that says, "Road closed." Some ignore the sign, which they soon regret. One video taken of the scene focuses on a huge crack in the pavement, with the camera tilting up to reveal dramatic ripples buckling the road. The camera then slowly pans to a spot where the asphalt has bent up to create a huge bump. The next shot shows parts of the pavement jutting up at sharp angles like a skateboarding ramp, which is how some kids use it. Journalist Eric Grundhauser says many assume this must be the result of some seismic disaster.
It seems to undulate as though it was destroyed by the passing of something large and destructive, like earthquake activity.
But there's something missing from the earthquake theory: the quaking.
At the time, nobody reported feeling any sort of disturbance.
Or perhaps this road was a casualty of a secretive tunneling creature: human beings.
In nearby Corsham, there is an underground bunker complex that has some 10 miles of roads connecting various hospitals and other services that were all built in 1955 by the military for leaders, politicians, generals, and the like. But when that use never materialized, the bunker city essentially was abandoned.
The project to build that underground headquarters was codenamed Subterfuge. So you'll excuse us if we speculate that there may be other hidden secrets beneath the surface. Let's turn to our experts to see what they can dig up. First, meteorologist Juan Hernandez examines if this could be the result of an earthquake.
England doesn't really lie on the edge of any plate tectonic. Usually, earthquakes happen on the edges of plate tectonics because of all that stored energy. There was a recorded earthquake in February of 2022. It was a 2.8 magnitude about 100 miles away in West Bromwich. Now, a 2.8 magnitude earthquake is not going to cause this much damage. We're probably looking at a 4, 5, or beyond for it to start causing damage to roads.
So if this wasn't caused by shaking Earth, could this be the work of giant worms? NASA geologist Dr. Bob Anderson investigates.
One of the ideas about the destruction of this road is that it was created by a worm called Microchaetus rabi. These worms average about 6 feet in length, but the longest has been identified as 21 feet long. But they only average less than an inch in diameter. So even if that worm was digging a trough under this road, it could not cause this kind of destruction that we see in the video.
If there is no worm large enough to produce this degree of damage, then could the theory about secret tunnels like the military's Burlington bunker in Corsham hold some weight?
Here in this region, this mining and quarry was turned over to the government in England and made into a military base. But I think I can rule that one out because the length of it shows that it's almost a sinusoidal wave. It's a motion type of wave on the rock. And so you can see that if it was a roof collapse, you'd have a hole, a depression.
Not only that, but maps show that the location of the Burlington bunker doesn't overlap with where we see this ripped up road in Lynham. So, could this be a different type of natural disaster?
The main cause, in my opinion, is illustrated right here on this picture where you see the trees. A tree will always grow towards the sun. And if you go along areas where the land has been disturbed and you start seeing trees that are growing at an angle, that means that what you're having is a downhill movement of material like a landslide. The hillside is moving very, very slowly and over time till it gets to a point where it breaks. And that downhill movement is called mass wasting.
Hernandez says the weather data shows this mass wasting, the movement of rock and soil by the force of gravity, is the most likely cause.
The UK is usually plagued with bad weather. It is known for cloudy conditions. It's known for rainfall. When you couple significant amount of rain, strong winds, and moist soils, you often have landslides that usually look like this, especially given the terrain that is very steep in this area.
Our verdict? This damage was almost certainly caused by a landslide, though we can't say for sure how it was triggered. And by the way, if you ever come across one yourself, experts say to evacuate the area immediately. You know what they don't suggest? Driving past all the turn back now signs.